Russian soldiers resigning en masse as Putin's war falters. Russian soldiers are resigning en masse, 8 months into the war that President Vladimir Putin launched against Ukraine, according to the governor of Luhansk Oblast, Serhiy Haidai. Haidai said on his Telegram channel that many Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine are writing letters of resignation and prematurely terminating their contracts. Half of the 200 military personnel serving in the 3rd Guard Special Operations Brigade have submitted letters of resignation or prematurely terminated their contracts after taking part in the war against Ukraine, he wrote. The governor noted, though, that first-timers, or Russian soldiers recently conscripted as part of Putin's mobilization decree, are ready to go into battle. About 500 mobilized servicemen from the 205th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade of the 49th Combined Arms Army went to the combat zone to replenish the enemies, Russia's, losses in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, he wrote. Haidai said the newly mobilized recruits were wearing Soviet-style helmets and armed with AK-12 rifles, which he explained historically have a lot of issues. It's not the first time Russian soldiers have refused to fight Putin's war in Ukraine. Ukraine's Operational Command South reported in a Facebook post last month that soldiers with the 127th Regiment of the 1st Army Corps rioted and refused to further participate in the war over a lack of vital supplies such as water. According to the command, the soldiers lacked support, while personnel in advanced positions didn't have water. The servicemen were reportedly removed from their unit as punishment. In July, Andrei Rinkino, legal head of the Free Buryatia Foundation, told Russian independent media outlet Media Zona that 17 Russian soldiers were detained in Ukraine's eastern Luhansk region for refusing to fight. Some were also reportedly threatened with being deployed to combat assault squadrons for asking to return home. Such squadrons are typically created to lead an attack and are expected to sustain heavy casualties in operations. A Russian soldier was also sentenced for refusing to fight in the war in Ukraine in July, according to court records. Ilya Kononov, a contract soldier from the city of Pskov in western Russia, was charged with unauthorized abandonment of the unit after he left his military unit without permission for more than 10 days. The contract soldier was subsequently sentenced on July 21 to restriction in military service for 1 year, with a 10% deduction from his monetary allowance going to the state. It comes as Putin's war flags amid a series of successful counteroffensives by Kyiv to retake its territory in the south and northeast of the country. Russian troops in Donetsk ordered to stop fighting amid desertion. Russian army leaders recently ordered their troops in the Ukrainian region of Donetsk to temporarily stop fighting amid low morale and desertion, according to Alexander Stupun, the Ukrainian spokesperson of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In some areas of combat, including in the Donetsk region, enemy units began to receive orders from higher leadership to temporarily suspend offensive actions, Stupun said in a military operational update posted on Facebook late Wednesday night. The main reason is the extremely low moral and psychological state of replenishment, numerous facts of desertion from the number of mobilized and non-compliance of combat orders. I think the halt in fighting in Donetsk mostly confirms what everyone already knew, that Russia's mobilization is not going smoothly and will not make a meaningful difference on the battlefield for at least the next several months, Kyle Haynes, associate professor in the Department of Political Science at Purdue University, told Newsweek on Thursday. Haynes also said that Ukraine's ability to quickly move forces and supplies along the front lines gives the Eastern European country the advantage of deciding when and where it would launch future combat operations. Russia's decision to halt its sputtering offensive in Donetsk suggests it is finally acknowledging this fact, he added. Matthew Schmidt, National Security Associate Professor at the University of New Haven, explained to Newsweek on Thursday that the temporary suspension of fighting in Donetsk indicates that Putin is facing increasing evidence that he can't hide that there's a Russian military failure. Russian President Vladimir Putin had given a September 15 deadline for Russian troops to push to the administrative borders of eastern Donetsk in efforts to take control of the region, Alexei Gromov, deputy chief of the main operational department of the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces, said earlier last month. However, since then, Putin has repeatedly failed to take over the region, which was annexed by Moscow after widely criticized referendums. By late September, Ukrainian forces had taken back the settlement of Yatskivka east of the Oskil River in Donetsk, according to Gromov. Our forces are improving their tactical position as, the Ukrainian online newspaper Ukrainska Pravda quoted him as saying. Thanks to timely regrouping of the units of one of the mechanized brigades and high level of combat organization, we managed to retake the lost position and take the positions to the south of Bakhmut under our control. Most recently, Ukrainian officials said earlier this month that Russia failed to advance in 5 different cities in Donetsk in one single day. Over the past 24 hours, units of the Defense Forces of Ukraine have repelled enemy attacks in the areas of Maersk, New York, Zaitsev, Nevelsk, and Pobeda, the operational update read at the time. Ukraine also recently regained control of Lyman, a key city in Donetsk that was used by Russian forces for transportation purposes throughout the invasion launched by Putin on February 24. Russia said on October 1 that it moved its troops to a more advantageous position. Russian troops have been grappling with a number of issues as Ukraine took back some of its Russian-occupied territories amid counteroffensive operations in recent weeks. Putin's military has been struggling with poor leadership and faces difficulty recruiting motivated troops. Those struggles combined with bolstered military support to Ukraine from the West weakened Russia and helped Ukrainian forces advance in the war. Ukrainian authorities said that their country regained control over thousands of square miles of territory in September and made key advances in October. Haines predicted that Russia's goal at the moment would be to prevent any further losses in the territories it occupied and make it hard for Ukrainian forces to carry out further counteroffensives. Newly mobilized conscripts simply won't have the training or equipment to conduct sustained offensive operations. But they can dig trenches, pile sandbags, move supplies, and generally help fortify Russian positions along the front lines, the political science associate professor said. Russia can no longer really choose where it wants to fight. Its goal is simply to limit Ukrainian advances until winter comes, and then dig in, deploy more troops, and resupply them before things thaw out in the spring, he said. Meanwhile, Schmidt said that Russia's new recruits who were mobilized in Ukraine are terrified as they barely know how to shoot and that can lead only to poor morale. Despite Ukrainian successes and the Russian army's shortcomings, Putin is still persistent to keep on fighting. The Russian leader recently announced a partial mobilization of forces that involves calling up reservists and people who had already served in the army to fight in Ukraine. Some experts think that Putin plans to make the Russian invasion of Ukraine as long and destructive as possible. Putin faced with mass desertion after 150 troops killed in precision strike. Great Britain has already given Ukraine thousands of anti-tank, anti-ship and anti-aircraft missiles, including Starstreak, MLAW and Brimstone missiles. Vladimir Putin is facing extremely low morale and the desertion of troops after a series of successful Ukrainian strikes. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said on Thursday that the previous day it had hit 3 S-300 anti-aircraft missile systems in the city of Tokmak, in the Zaporizhzhia region, one of the 4 that Vladimir Putin has claimed he had annexed. Ukrainian military reported, in the Kherson region, as a result of targeted fire damage in the area of Tokarivka, the enemy's losses amounted to up to 150 people killed. Due to such cases, the soldiers of the occupying army have extremely low morale. They often desert and ignore orders, especially when mobilized. Due to such cases, the soldiers of the occupying army have extremely low morale, the statement said, according to a translation. They often desert and ignore orders, especially when mobilized. Thursday's update from Kyiv's forces said in certain areas of hostilities, in particular in the Donetsk region, Russian units had received orders to temporarily stop offensive operations.